Assalamu alaikum to the new teachers and the teachers who have taught for millions of years. I want to give a modeling on curriculum maps, unit plans, and lesson plans. Very quickly, your curriculum map was due tomorrow. Your lesson plan was also due tomorrow. And some of you are going, what is that and how do I make that? Well, this is a lesson in itself by Allah's permission and grace. You never give a child anything and assume they know how to do it because they look smart, or they're old enough, or they should be mature enough, or anything like that. You're always supposed to model your lessons. So if you say, I'm about to give you a test, you make sure you model how to number your paper. If you're going to give anything, you make sure you model what you're going to do. And you make sure you do it ahead of time to lessen frustration in the child. Because many of you were super frustrated, I know, because some came to me on how to do what I asked you to do. Well, like we're taught, when you don't understand, always ask questions, right? Ask questions when you don't understand. That was in our orientation package. So let's go through here and talk about a curriculum map. Now, a curriculum map means you're going to talk about the standards. So some of you have your own standards for the first time ever. If you're teaching coding, like Brother Shantain will be doing, or Sister Karima is teaching on, she said, the Innkeeper's Handbook, which is Our Savior Has Arrived, or Fall of America, or How Did You Live, I think it is, How Did You Live. So that means that you take the whole book of How Did You Live, since that's going to be your textbook, and you break that down, okay? So you know that's going to be so many chapters. You know that you're going to break it into how long we're going to teach. This is trimesters. If you're going to teach it throughout the entire all 3 trimesters, and different levels of it for every chapter, then you would break it down into, count out the number of months, look at the calendar, which I will send to you, and then you will break it down. So let's look at this. In curriculum map, it says, first thing it says standards taught, right? So standards taught. Now standards, of course, is based upon the state standards. You're not having state standards. This is the Nation of Islam standard. So you're basing the standards you're going to teach on the subjects, the topics that you're going to cover in the time frame you're going to teach. Then your curriculum big ideas. So what's the big point of what you're doing? Right? And then you have under that essential questions. What questions are you trying to get answered in what you are teaching in that particular standard? Okay? It breaks it down for you. And then you come again, you have assessments. What are you going to test? What are you going to test for? What are you evaluating for? Then your resources. What is your source of information? What are you going to be using? Are you going to be using handouts? What's the title of those handouts? Are you going to be using something you found on the internet? What's the title of that? You're going to be using one of the messenger's books or the minister's books. What's the title of that? Dr. Ava's book. What's the title of that? Make sure you list your resources so that someone who, if you're not here, a sub can pick up your curriculum plan and start teaching from it. And that's the whole point of this. Now, you're going to ask yourself, how much time are you giving yourself on that particular standard? How much time are you giving to that standard? And then you might have a possible loss of time, meaning how many days might you lose if there's a holiday, if we're going to be out for the Holy Day of Atonement or Savior's Day. How much time may you lose in that? So let me slide this so you all can see it. I hope everybody can see it. Okay? So I'm going to do one for biology, right? So the subject I'm going to do is biology. Well, the state already has biology standards, so I can just go by those. The standards are actually called units or whatever they're going to do. But the first thing I do is the first standard in biology is inquiry. I-N-Q or inquiry. Depends on who's saying the word. Inquiry or inquiry. And the big idea is inquiry. What's the whole point of that? Is the student learns to ask, test, and answer questions in science. Now, inquiry follows the entire year in biology because every time you have a question, you're going to ask the student, how do you break this down? The essential questions are, do you know how to use the scientific method. Now that's one way to test it. The other one is I want to know what this whole process of inquiry. Can you convert measurements from standard to metric? Can you convert from English, excuse me, I said standard, English standard to metric? These are questions I want to know. Can this child do these things at the end of my lesson? In inquiry, can this child perform an experiment? Can you perform experiment without help? Another thing I want this child to be able to do in inquiry is, can you read graphs? Because that's how your experiment is expressed in graphs. But what's the point of a graph if a child can't read it? So can you read graphs? So these are all the basic questions I need answered on my curriculum map. Now, most teachers have more time than what you're doing. It usually takes about a month to make a curriculum map, which is that's why I'm not expecting you to be able to do that all of a sudden. I just want you to try your hand at it. We'll go over professional developments on how to develop your curriculum map. Oftentimes, the curriculum map is already given to the teacher from the district. You're just teaching what they told you to teach. They give you the textbooks, but we're starting from a different place here. Okay, so we're creating our curriculum maps. It may take you a little while to get the hang of it, but you still have to have your lesson plans based upon what you think you know you're doing. Okay, it's a call on the law kind of situation because of the time that we have. The assessments in this case, let me turn this so that you can see it. The assessments are, what are you going to assess? What are you going to test? I'm going to test metric conversions. That's one of my assessments. I'm going to test knowledge of the scientific method. Now, in the scientific method, you have to know the parts of an experiment. So I'm going to test the parts of an experiment, and that would be the controls, the independent variable, the dependent variable, things like that. So knowledge of parts of an experiment. What else do I want to know? Does that person know the parts of a graph, the independent variable versus the dependent variable? One that stands alone while one is dependent upon the experiment itself. So independent and dependent variables. So independent versus dependent variables. Now later on, remember this is all grades. I can't throw this at a seventh grader like I'm gonna throw it at an 11th grader. Okay. It's done different ways for different things. The same way the minister teaches those of us who are first coming in the mosque, the same way he teaches those who have been in here for 30 years. He has a way of teaching it in such a way, breaking it down in such a way that even a baby can understand it. Even the high levels can get it versus those who are just learning how to do this. We may have students coming in that have never learned this stuff before, don't know the teaching. So those of you in theological studies or teaching from the books of the messenger, you've got to be able to study in such a way that you can break it down to the children. There's nothing wrong with studying as you labor. So there's nothing wrong with learning it as you go and breaking it down as you go along, okay? But what we don't want is parking lot planning. You want to make sure you have planned ahead, not out there in the parking lot. The resources you're going to use, I may use a textbook, I may use a textbook, and then at this point I would name that of the textbook. I may use a website. I'll put the www. whatever that is, and so on and so forth. And then the time it'll take me to teach inquiry. Inquiry, you see how many subjects I got in there? That's going to take about 4 weeks, okay? So I'll put on here 4 weeks. Because it takes time to learn, go from standard to metric, to do the scientific method. I may have some projects I want to do. You're not going to put all that in this. You're going to put that in your unit plan, okay? And your lesson plan. Your unit plan will talk about your larger body. You'll break this down a little further. Then your lesson plan, your unit plan will break down your big ideas and essential questions. Your lesson plan will say the individual things you plan to do every day. Tomorrow we're going to have science fair. Tomorrow, tomorrow we're going to do they're going to do the paper towel experiment, things of that nature. So your lesson plan explains for the day.